Okay, on to Rangers. Let's deal with the manager first of all. If we've been singing the praises of Jimmy Tillene, Philippe Clement looks like a man now who is just coming out with one ridiculous statement after another. I mean, at one point last night in the after-match interview, he said, if he's onside by a toenail, suddenly the game changes. And I thought, it's really getting a bit silly now.
I think he lost it about 6 months ago. I think he lost it round about the time. I think the big warning signs was the moral victory over in the lap of honour for a 3-each draw. I think that was a huge warning sign as well. When Clement came to Scotland, journalists made the calls and to contacts in France and Belgium, what we're getting, what's going to come over here. And by and large, the big red flag was it doesn't react well under pressure. Right, that was a consensual view, and I said, well, he's come to the wrong place because there is nothing but pressure at Rangers. And after an initial sort of honeymoon period, won a League Cup, went on a good run. Once the wheels came off, it's been, to continue the wheels come off analogy, it's been a car crash since then, and it's been most evident in his press conferences, which have astonishing moments. There's moments where he's gone up doing the Tiller girls. There's moments where he's talking about toenails. Moments last night, which was, I think most Rangers fans will look at and say, this was our best performance of the season. The one where he goes and after a disappointing, they had 4 shots. I mean, these things are getting into the actual kind of the cultural psyche, and I think at one point last night when I was looking at him, I just went, God, you've gone.
Yeah, the only thing I would say, and this is the key element of this, and this is where possibly we might all disagree, on the back of the financial results, on the comments of John Bennett before he stepped down, on the comments of the interim chairman and John Gilligan, can they afford to sack him?
Well, they gave him a new 1-year contract extension. It's difficult to say if that would have changed the terms of his payoff. Possibly not. You get to the point where, I think as Hugh referred to there, when you lose a game like that, I don't think there's much a Rangers manager can say to make it better, but I think he can absolutely make it worse. And that's what Clement repeatedly does do with these comments that we're referring to. So you get such a level of fan disillusionment where you say, well, can they afford to pay him off given these financial figures, which are a car crash? Possibly not. But then you have to balance up, can they afford to not pay him off?
Yeah.
Because the supporters, Peter, are gone now. I mean, he's a dead man walking. You get to that point where I think the directors don't want to sack him. I think the John Bennett mindset of rinse and repeat and let's avoid that is uppermost in their thinking. And I kind of respect that because on one hand you think, well, how much difference can one managerial change make when the foundations are so poor, when there's a revolving door in the boardroom, when the finances are so bad? Can a change of manager really improve things so much? You might get a short-term bounce like you did when Clement came in 13 months ago. Will it change the overall scenario? The one thing it will do is get supporters off their back. I mean, I don't think, for example, all the Rangers tickets for the semi-final this Sunday are sold out. That's almost unheard of for semi-final at Hampden. So that shows you that apathy and anger is becoming a real problem. It will become a financial problem as well, Peter. Therefore, to answer your question, can they afford to not pay him off? Maybe not.
The breaking point is always when the fans are at the doors. That's always the breaking point. And that's when I think their hand is forced where they can't go anywhere. My point on can they afford to sack him is quite simply reading and listening to what the comments are coming out of that boardroom. When you've posted losses of 17 million and the general feeling is next term's results are going to be equally as bad, but when you have an interim chairman saying we are now going for £8 million again with loans to try and you just to try and basically steady the ship.
Yeah, the fundamental problem always going to be faced with Rangers to break this cycle is that you have a club which there is no quick and easy solution to this. There's still a kind of mindset that a kind of sugar daddy or a Mr. Big will come in and throw 50 to 100 million pounds at it, and everything will be okay. Everyone will doff their cap and everything will be okay. That's not the solution. There is no overnight solution to this. Financial sustainability of UEFA restricts up to 70% of their spending and their turnover. You also have the fact that, you know, there's no one really banging down the door out there. The only way to really change this and improve it is to do the hard work and the hard miles. That means developing a proper player trading model. It means Champions League football. Two of the pillars that they spoke about at the AGMs, which they've miserably failed to deliver. And until they get there, I don't really see much changing. But against that, it's a long-term rebuilding job. You have this incredibly impatient fan base. And how you square that circle, I don't know.
That is the most damning part of this whole scenario for me, because quite simply you have a generation of entitlement who think that Rangers are this club that should be the #1 club in Scotland, so they are always banging the drum. You then have, as we were talking about there, Hugh, a situation where you have £17 million in losses, but if you are then getting to a situation where you need 8 million and you have a disenchanted fan base, you have to then pay off one set of managers, a manager with his backroom staff, and then go and try and recruit another. That takes a little chunk of the money, and then the manager then comes in and says, well, I don't like what I've inherited, and you're going to give me something.
Well, the manager says that before he comes in. The manager sits down and says, right, how much am I getting to think? And none of this airy-fairy will back you to, no, let's get figures down. Because I think it's becoming increasingly clear that Clement, who has been backed really well actually, you can have no complaints about that, but I think he didn't, in fact I'm sure he didn't realise what he was stepping into. I don't think he did the deepest of due diligence that he might have done, because a manager coming in now is going to look at this from the outside, see the figures, see what's happened to Clement. I remember Clement's CV was pretty decent. He'd won titles in Belgium. He'd managed Monaco. And say to yourself, is this a job I really want? This is the big problem with Rangers at the moment, because if you look at it from the outside, you say, right, who's running that club? Two retired guys, you know, John Gilligan and George Latham, who isn't on the board, you know, are running this.
Yeah.
You've got a kind of absentee landlords, people abroad come. So the day-to-day running, and we all know the litany of who haven't got a chief executive officer, they haven't got director of football, they haven't got this, they haven't got that, they haven't got the next thing. So then we look at this and says, is this something I really want to take on? There will be people who will say yes, but they won't be there. They'll be there.
Yeah.
Maybe it's time for that realism to set in, that that's what needs to happen. Yeah. Instead of going, you know, going out, let's get a big name from Europe, maybe you just need someone who comes in, who knows how to play the game in Scotland, who will inject some pragmatism to the situation and basically cut their cloth to suit.
But that's a perfectly logical and rational point of view, as is the actual strategy for what it is that John Bennett first enunciated, that we have to do this, that's the next thing. But we said it. He said, that's all great on paper. But it's not great on the Thursday morning when you've just lost at 2-1 at Aberdeen, you're 9 points behind the league. It's not so great then.
The other big problem here with this whole scenario is you can't even get to a situation. Now we've already highlighted the manager's failings, and you know, after every press conference he seems to make it worse. You then have to look at his team and say, well, there's no identity, there's no style. No. I can't see anything that says this is a Philippe Clement side, the way you can say this is a Brendan Rodgers side.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you can even say this is a Jimmy Tilley side.
Yeah.
Or a Derek McInnes side.
That's what absolutely damns him. People can't see what he's trying to do. They can't see any structure, they can't see any obvious tactics. Effectively, if Rangers are going to get something from a game, they're relying every time on a moment of brilliance from a Bayrami, for example, like we did last night. Brilliant goal, really great moment of individual talent, and then he takes him off. I mean, I was staggered by that. I mean, Bajami was the only player who looked like he could bring, you know, he had one for the offside goal in the first half, which, by the way, the offside lines in that, like so many of the offside lines in Scottish football, I'm not sure about.
Yeah.
But really great moment where he turns his full-back, Nicky Devlin, I think it was, drives it in, McCausland puts it in, then he had really quick feet for that goal. And within 5 or 10 minutes of doing that, the manager pulls him off the pitch. And you're thinking, what in God's name are you doing, man?
Yeah. The other aspect of this, and this is where I'm going to flip it, is quite simply you have a situation in the background where not only does John Gilligan and George Latham have to try and work out, okay, where are we going to get someone? And shrewd businessmen usually only take over cases like Rangers when it's reached its absolute bottom end so they can pick it up for a swan song. That's the first thing. This notion that there's a multi-millionaire, billionaire who loved Rangers, was brought up in Govan and suddenly went away and made millions everywhere else. They're not out there. They're not out there in their tens. They're not out there in their hundreds. You know, you're struggling to find one who's got that mindset to say, I was brought up in Scotland, I was brought up a Rangers fan, I'm going to give them money willy-nilly. So the biggest job for John Gilligan is to try and, first of all, stabilise it, but he also has a problem going on in the background. You've got 4 or 5 people who are the main investors now, who all have a stake in the club, Stephen, and they all are actually jockeying around for power.
Yeah, you know, there's the old saying about managing by committee, isn't there? And that's very much what's happening at Rangers. I mean, I know 1 or 2 of the people involved, and they're reasonable people who want the best for Rangers. They absolutely are trying their best to put probably the limit of the money they can put into the club. And now they need new investors, and you know, there's this debt for equity swap which diminishes the value of the club. Where I think if you were to turn all the shares into money now, the club will be worth about 22 million quid or something.
Yeah.
So they can't carry on in this pattern. But equally, they're bringing in a multi-millionaire to transform overnight. That's not going to work either, because there's only way you can get out of this, to go back to the point, is to do the important basics well, to recruit well, to sell a Matt O'Reilly or a Jota every year for 17 to 20 million quid, to secure Champions League football. You've got to get those fundamentals right. There's no quick fix silver bullet here.
And the problem with that, and this is probably the final point on it, there is no quick fix. If you are then saying, right, we are going to bite the bullet here, we are going to stick to what John Bennett said, we are going to stick with the interim chairman, we are going to stick to this pathway to try and develop younger players, bring in younger players, reduce the average age in the side. If you do that, Hugh, you are walking a tightrope, which is basically you could get knocked out of a cup because there's inexperience in there. The players that you brought in, the poor recruitment is coming home to roost. The third element of it, which I think is the most important for the board, is when you're trying to do that in this balancing act, if you can't even get a shot at rolling the dice on the £60 million jackpot of the Champions League, if you can't even get 2 qualifiers to try and get in there, you know, if Aberdeen are suddenly in second place, you're denied that. Everything that you're thinking about is out of the window, because then your fallback position then must be, to save the club, is cut wages again.
Yeah, and then when you say, then you've got to look at income. And a vast a portion of income in Scottish football clubs, as against clubs in the English Premier League and elsewhere, comes from the fans. It doesn't, you know, Rangers have vastly improved their merchandising. You saw that in their commercial income. You saw that figures, but it comes from the fans. Rangers can rely on, you know, season ticket, book, sell out every year. Can they rely on that going forward? But is the appetite for that? Stephen talked about hope. Rangers coming up the leagues, the fans backed them totally, because there was this hope of a sunnier day tomorrow. They called it the journey. We'll get back the sunny uplands. But if you're saying not just selling to supporters, but showing supporters that this is going to be a long, hard road, you're going to go off the road, and you're going to fall down, and you're going to lose at Pittodrie, and you're not going to be in the shake-up for a league, and this might be long-term, does that have an impact on season ticket? I think it does.
Yeah.
And in European football as well, it's not just fan income. When European football's huge, and that's why we go back to this argument of can they afford to stand by him now? 9 points behind. They need to get that crack at the Champions League you referred to. It's going to be qualifiers now because the coefficient is taking a bit of a dent. You can only be there if you're one of the top two teams. They're third, they're 9 points adrift. So do you now take remedial action to repair that? That's a decision you have to make.
Yeah, and the ultimate thing that I think most sensible Rangers fans nowadays, as well as looking at results on the park, they're not fooled by the spin off the park. I mean, I almost fell off the chair when it said, great news is Rangers are no longer in court with anybody. And I thought, wow, is that the spin from the financial
It's some
figures?
great social media memes though, isn't it? You know, there's some great stuff flying about. Yeah, I mean, the scales have fallen off the eyes, and that's another problem for the board of directors. That effectively that's what's going to really cause them a major problem. Not just anger, but more damningly, apathy.
Yep.
Flip side of this, and this is what this city is all about. It is when one is in the doldrums and the other one is absolutely flying high. The difference between them, Celtic go out and defeat Dundee. Rotation in the squad is there for Brendan Rodgers. The difference between them on and off the park is the Grand Canyon and then some.
Yeah, and it's not just financial as well, because we talk about what a Rodgers team is. You just had to look at the highlights last night and you saw, Rodgers, he's taken a deep breath, Brendan, this season, and he's obviously not this one game at a time thing. He's obviously thrown that out the window, and he's sitting down with his staff and his sports science, and he's got a big list of this is the games coming up. And here are the games where I think we'll do all right and win, and we'll use, we'll bring in players, and it's coated with substantial danger, because the two major times he's done it is Falkirk and what I insist on calling the League Cup, where they were up against it for a spell in the game, and then last night when. You're sitting at 60 minutes or whatever, nothing each against Dundee. It can get tasty. Where he's got though is what he can bring on. I mean, last night he probably had 6 in the team that wouldn't be starters, I would say, and I now include Greg Taylor in that. But he can bring on what he brings on: Johnson, Hatate, Maida, and then he can change it. I mean, he probably would have brought on Ida as well if he'd have been in fit as well. That's what he's got on the bench. He's got the get out of jail card sitting on the bench. So even at Ross County as well, where Ross County teams in the Premier League or the Premiership can do very well for 60, 70 minutes, and then they're sweating. And John McGlynn said it with Falkirk. We're doing really well now, and then they see the guys warming up on the sideline. You go, oh my goodness, got to go again. So that's what they've got, and they've got that through. They've got that through good business. They've got that through because they've earned the money, and so they've earned the right to do that.
The most significant point for me, though, Stephen, in all of this, yes, you can beat Dundee. I wonder where, but for a blip and a draw, I can't see them losing games, because they've got that abundance of quality on the bench. I can't see them losing games domestically. But where I judge them and where I'm looking at it is, there's no doubt Brendan is a good coach. But to become an even better coach or a great coach, that result against Atalanta for me was a significant line in the sand. No matter what way, and again, we're too old in the head to listen to the spin on things. He can call it pragmatism and he can have his wee dig at everybody. But the point is this: he had to change the tactics and the way Celtic played to actually sit in and say, do you know what? We are going to rough it out here and get a really good, hard-fought point against Atalanta by sitting in, keeping it a solid bank of 4, backed with 5, and even the centre forward is going to track back so we can get 11 behind the ball. And Celtic fans who made that journey, spent their money, were delighted.